to the UIAAA Connection podcast. GoFan and VNN are proud to be the exclusive sponsor of the UIAAA Connection. Now a combined company, GoFan and VNN provide a seamless integration for digital ticketing and athletic websites. Direct your fans to one place for all your athletic events, communications, and tickets to home and away games. Thank you to GoFan and VNN for their exclusive sponsorship of the UIAAA Connection.
Welcome back to another edition of the UIAAA Connection. I'm your host, Mark Hutch Hunter. Today we have as our special guest Mike Morris, Certified Master Athletic Administrator, the Executive Director of the Illinois Athletic Directors Association. Welcome to the podcast, Mike.
Hey, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Let's have you begin by sharing with our audience here in the U.S. and across the world where you grew up, where you went to college, your first job, etc.
Sure. I'm the oldest son of seven. My dad was a teacher coach, and I grew up in central Illinois, and then when I was 12, we moved to suburbia outside of Chicago at Lombard East High School. Went to school there, school about 3,500 students, and was fortunate to graduate and go on to the University of Illinois and play a little football until I was injured. My end of my sophomore year, I had a spinal injury. They found out I was missing half a cervical vertebrae, and so it ended my playing career as a football player. But it gave me a lot of opportunities that I probably would have never had if I hadn't gotten injured. I was able to work as called a student assistant on the football team. And in the off season, I was able to work as an athletic trainer for the wrestling and gymnastics teams, and gave me another perspective of the world of athletics. After that, I graduated from the University of Illinois with honors, and I was hired at Macomb, Illinois, which is where Western Illinois University was at. And it's kind of different. I was an Illinois grad teaching in a public high school in Macomb that was predominantly Western Illinois people. And the principal told me I was hired because they wanted some different. Well, they got someone different. They got a suburban kid to come there, and that had not had anything to do with Western Illinois at all, except that had been recruited there as a high school athlete. But spent 2 years there, got my master's degree. While I was there, I had 5 student teachers. Seemed like we were like the breeding ground for every student teacher, and was hired by my former junior varsity basketball coach at Lombard North High School in Carroll Stream, and was there for 5 years. Decided I had to be a head football coach, and I took the first head football coaching job that was offered to me. It happened to be in a small parochial school in central Illinois, where my dad had coached when we were very young kids. And the uniqueness about this particular school was half the student body was boarders. They actually boarded kids there during the year. And we were about 350 kids at the time. And I would say at least 150 of those kids were boarders. Well, during that year, unbeknownst to me, after I got hired, the abbot, the head person of the Benedictines, decided to close the boarding school. Oh boy. And we were playing level competition way above where we should have been playing. And we were going to lose 40 of our returning football players. So I decided to look elsewhere. And fortunately, I was able to get a job outside of Champaign, Illinois. I was working on my advanced administrative certificate, so it kind of fell together. I became a head football coach again at St. Joseph Ogden, which is a public school, and they hadn't won a football game in years. So I knew what I was getting myself into. Went there, started to build a program. We was the first person to ever do a weight program, first person to have a summer program. And May 1st, I get a phone call from my best friend in college who was teaching at Lionstown High School. And he said, "Hey, would you like to interview for a job at our school?" I said, "Well, not really." He said, "No, you really do want to interview for this job." I said, "Why?" He says, "Well, because it's got all the things you want to do. Plus, I think long range, the athletic director is going to retire." So I went and interviewed, and um, I went and I had to offer both a physical education job and a driver education job, two different jobs. So I took the job and was the offensive coordinator in football, was a wrestling coach, and the head girls track coach. Uh, and that led to me working as a coach, being involved, and the assistant athletic director was a female, and she retired, and I put my name in. I didn't expect to get it because typically in our district, the assistant was always a female. And applied for the job and got the job and got called in by the superintendent and said, "You know why we hired you?" And I said, "No." I said, Because I was the best candidate." He said, "No, because you're going to be the next athletic director." Oh, I said, "Well, that's good to know," but I didn't. He ended up actually leaving 2 years later, so it really had nothing to do with the story. That's how I kind of got involved with athletics at Lyons Township High School, which is a suburban school, about 4,000 kids. We have two campuses. Our freshmen, sophomore on one campus, our juniors, seniors another. And had 110 coaches. The second year I was the assistant athletic director for 5 years and became the athletic director for a year. And the next year they switched to division chairs. And now I became the division chair of athletics, student activities, and physical education for 4,000 kids. Had three great assistants and 110 coaches, 80 sponsors, and 24 health and physical education teachers. So it was fun. It was an experience.
My follow-up would be, what is it like to be an AD at a school that's got two campuses, 110 coaches? I get, I know you have some assistants, but maybe delve into that a little bit more. That's incredible to me.
Uh,
4,000 kids, that's almost like that could be
Fortunately,
a junior college in some states.
well, it was as big as junior colleges in Illinois. I think at the time we were the second largest public high school outside the city of Chicago. And fortunately, having been a coach for 5 years prior to becoming the assistant athletic director, and then being the assistant athletic director for 5 years, it was kind of a natural progression through the system. And I had grown up my dad had taught at Lombard East, which was a school about 3,500 at the time. I It was kind of natural, but when we went to the division concept, when I ended up having both athletics, student activities, and physical education under my umbrella, so to speak, I was fortunate to have really, really great assistants. Had a outstanding person in physical education, had my assistant athletic director, and my administrative assistant in athletics were just outstanding. And my student activities person understood the world of student activities. So basically, I tell people I was the shall answer man. I was the person out in front answering the questions, but many times I had to go back to them to actually get the real solution to the question. So we had a really, really good group. Fortunate had been a head coach for those years prior to 10 years prior to becoming the official athletic director. So I had a real good collegial consensus group when we got together as athletic directors, or I should say as coaches, to work on different problems that we had with our system. Uh, just, I decided that the only way to really do it was to ask them the questions, ask a lot of rhetorical questions, and let them come up to some kind of consensual decision that we could all live with, rather than trying to be an autocrat that said this is the way that's going to happen. Because through my career as a coach in the other schools that I was at, I realized that that was probably the best way to keep the organization moving in a upward transition. When I started as the athletic director, I think we had about 1,800 award winners. When I retired, um, some 20 years later, we had like almost 3,000 award winners each year. So we did a really good job of increasing participation, increasing the number of sports. But each time you increase the sport, you also increase your supervision, and you obviously increase your management techniques, and hopefully you get those individuals that join the organization, have the same mindset that you, the same mission, same goal, which is to make our kids, give them the best opportunity they could have. And with the community that we lived in, expectation was extremely high. They wanted their kids to be successful. 97% of our kids went on to four-year schools, and their parents were all, successful business people, really, really, really high-notch caliber people who wanted their kids to succeed.
That's fascinating. Thanks for that additional insight. Let's have you talk for a minute about some of the leaders and mentors in your life that have made a difference to you over the years.
Yeah, I was very fortunate along the way, as an athletic coach, to have some really good athletic directors. My first athletic director was Don Simpkins at Macomb High School. He was the head basketball coach, and he was also the athletic director. And about the third week of school, my first year there, he calls me into his office. He says, Mike, we need you to be the head wrestling coach. The season is going to start in about 6 weeks. Can you do it? I said, well, I'm sure I could do it, but am I sure the right person? He says, yeah, you're the right person. I've already heard from the head football coach what kind of organizational skills you have and things like that. And we really need you to be the head wrestling coach. Well, I had wrestled 1 year in high school, but my dad's best friend was a, a college coach at McMurray College in Jacksonville, which was about an hour and a half from Macomb. So I got in the car on a weekend and went there and spent a whole weekend relearning how to coach wrestling. It was a great experience. But Don taught me that you could take a person who had the passion, energy, and enthusiasm to be a coach. You could teach them how to be a coach, and you could they could be the leader of kids. My second really outstanding athletic director was Father Kevin Gorman at St. Bede Academy. He was the type of athletic director that whatever you needed done, he did it. Here's a man of the cloth who's out lining the football field, who's repairing equipment for you. And I got a whole nother viewpoint of what an athletic director could be. It was the fact that it was important that you were there to facilitate the coaches that were working under you as the athletic director. And when I had the opportunity to go to Lyons Township, my athletic director was Murney Lazier. Murney Lazier was one of the first athletic directors to be an NIAAA Hall of Famer. He was on the original group that wrote the questions for the CAA exam. So the day I walked in as the assistant AD, I was already informed that you are going to be involved in the IADEA state organization and the NIAAA. And through his tutelage, and sometimes I didn't appreciate it at the time, he was kind of grooming me to be the next athletic director. So he put me in positions where probably I wouldn't have elected to be. After the first year, all of a sudden he said, "You're now evaluating all the female coaches," which had never been done before. He had done all the evaluations. So he had trusted me, but I said, "You really want me to do this?" And he goes, "Yeah, I want you to learn." And I said, "Well, we're going to have a lot of meetings because I want to make sure I'm going to do this the way we're." I was involved with him quickly. Superintendent came to him and said, "We want you to cut 10% of your athletic program." And at the time, we looked at each other and said, "We're just trying to build it up, not shrink it." And so we sat down and analyzed everything, and we actually put everything into a fact sheet. And then we met with the superintendent to say, is this what you want? Because we can do it, but here's the result. If we make your 10% cut, we're going to lose what we call our developmental levels, our freshman B and freshman C football, sophomore B football and basketball, our JV2 wrestling, our girls JV2 programs, because the only way you're going to cut anything in that budget is to cut salaries. And that was mean coaching stipends, which meant less kids are going to be involved in our organization. So I was able to do that and learn all those things as an assistant AD, where I wasn't right in the firing line all the time. But as he got near to his retirement date, it was amazing how Mike, no, you're going to the meeting now. You are now me. You're going to be the athletic director. And so I had to go and do a lot of things that most assistant athletic directors never had the opportunity to do before I became the athletic director. So I was very fortunate to have those kind of mentors along the way, along with the 14 athletic directors in our conference. They were extremely um, knowledgeable, passionate about what they did, and willing to share and give advice, whether you need it or not. You most likely got it because they didn't want you to have the same problems they had as they grew up. And it's kind of been my modus operandi with the young ADs is I try to have them avoid the pitfalls that many of us had that caused us problems. And when we had a problem in our school or we had a situation, then I would go back to our head coaches and sit down and we would discuss how to not have this happen again. And that through their consensus building, we came up with ways to avoid having some of the conflicts reoccur. So that was pretty cool.
That's some great insight. Let me ask you a little bit of a personal question here, Mike. What's your biggest failure or disappointment in life, and what did you learn from it?
Well, I'm going to give you two. One was kind of a selfish one. When I was, let's see, 1970, I'm 29 years old, and I decide that I have to be a head football coach. And so I left a very, very good job, which again, if I had probably stayed, I would have probably been in line to become the athletic director. But no, I had to be a head football coach. So my ego got in the way that after I made the transition, it wasn't a money thing. It wasn't anything like that. It was just purely, I wanted to be a head football coach. And I can tell my coaches that I have counseled in my years as the athletic director who would come to say, I'm not going to be the athletic director here, or I'm not going to be the next head tennis coach here because this guy is going to be for 25 years. What do I do? And I said, well, you need to think about long term, not short term. You need to think about what is your ultimate goal down the road. If your ultimate goal is to be the head tennis coach, then yes, you're probably going to have to look elsewhere because I don't believe our tennis coach is going to be going anywhere in the near future, 10 years or so. But if you can make the best of your job as the assistant tennis coach and put yourself in a situation where you become a valued member of the coaching staff and your head coach values you as a co-head coach, it may work out for you the betterment for your family because you won't have to move, you won't have to transition to a new school, uh, start your tenure process all over, all those kinds of things. So I think that was kind of important. Uh, the second one was I decided when I was at St. Joseph Island, it was in the middle of the energy crisis in the early 80s. And one day I'm teaching physical education, and it's first period in the morning, and I'm uh, teaching volleyball in the gym. And all of a sudden, half the lights go out in the gym. And I look over, and it's the custodian. He's flipping off half the lights. I say, hey, Ron, what are you doing? He said, they told me to shut off half the lights. I said, we can't see. He said, that's what the superintendent said. Well, I'm not going to argue with him. So I went over, he left, and I went over and flipped the lights back on. At the end of the period, I had another class and I taught P that period. Third period, I went down and went to see the superintendent. And again, being not very smart and a little bit uh, rash, I asked the superintendent if he could put in writing that he wanted me to teach in my classroom, the gym, with half the lights on. And he turned and asked me if I put in writing that I wouldn't teach in that gym with half the lights on because I was told by my superior. And I said, "Oh, I get it. I get it." And I turned around and walked out. And I learned a lesson that day about remember what you wish for sometimes. You know, I wished for being a head football coach, and then I realized maybe that wasn't all that I needed to be. And then I wished to have all the lights on, but the superintendent had another reason for having it, and I did like my paycheck. So I learned there had to be a better way of doing some of those things. So that was
That's
probably my
fascinating.
biggest downfall.
That's fascinating. Thanks so much for sharing that. Let me ask you, Mike, from your perspective, and you having been an AD for years and still involved at your state level, the job of AD today, how is it different from when you first began in the 80s?
Yeah, it was amazing because I'm going to go back all the way to 1972 when I started my master's degree at Western Illinois. They had an emphasis on athletic administration in the physical education master's program. So I started in that. And that was the first year Illinois went from a one class system in basketball to a two class system. And my advisor said, "Hey, I think I've got a really good topic. Would you like to try this as your thesis?" Sure, whatever. Launched one on the duties and responsibilities of Class 2A, the large class athletic directors in the state of Illinois, because he had been asked several times by athletic directors across the state to come up with a finite list of duties and responsibilities. So I did my thesis and I did the research and came up with a long, I think about 120 different items that were duties and responsibilities of athletic directors. Did the thesis, completed it, and put it on the shelf. Never thought about it at that time. I completed my obligations to the thesis. Well, as time, I became the assistant athletic director. My first year, the athletic director said, "You're taking on all scheduling." And I said, "Okay." So I can do that because I've already scheduled half the wrestling stuff and half the track stuff. And I said, "Okay." And my son at the time was really into computers, and he said, "Dad, I know there's got to be a computer program out there that can help you facilitate rather than you trying to use uh, paper and pencil or I think we were using at the time We're Perfect was the language we were using to do stuff
Sure.
with, even before Excel. And so I started with a program called AD Assist. I think I was one of the first athletic directors in the suburban area to do it. And so I'm now teaching my other 13 other assistant ADs and ADs in the schools in our conference how to use this particular program. Well, about 4 years later, uh, the athletic director at Downers Grove North and Downers Grove South had a young volunteer coach who's a programmer at Argonne National Laboratory. And they said, "Hey, could you sit down with him and work with him to develop a program that will take care of our scheduling, our officials, our transportation, our workers, and things?" I said, "I'm sure we could." I said, we'll give it a go." So we sat there and built this thing. So the four of us built a system that we shared with 14 schools in our conference. And then because at that time, everybody was competing against each other for who had the best website. Well, our principals got together and they said, "We know you guys all have the same athletic scheduling program. Let's get somebody to build a website that each of our schools could have our own colors and our own logos and things on it, but it would be identical. That whatever, if you wanted to look for a football schedule, Proviso West High School, you could click on the WSC and click boom, and it would pop up. And about a year and a half later, we had it done. And then all of a sudden, our friends, our colleagues are all coming around saying, hey, from the Southwest Suburban Conference, can we get involved with this? So we ended up turning it into a business, which at that time was called Athletic 2000. And it
Hmm.
switched over to age 18, and now it's Snap Mobile. So no longer are we in it, but we started it and we built it. And I retired from, I think, 18 in 2019, just before Snap Mobile acquired them. And I had the good fortune of help rewriting the program to its more robust style today than it was. So if you're asking me the difference, I think I've been at the ground level where everything was paper and pencil, and we had these big, huge scheduling books that you wrote everything down and you raced it, and you had different colors and all kinds of things to make things go to the point now where the schedule basically handles itself. It rolls itself over. You hit a button, it sends a contract. The contract goes to the other school, comes back. It's all electronic. So it's the electronic and the media part of it is all pretty much taken care of. What I've seen as I've been in 500 different high schools in the last 15 years is the amount of work that athletic directors are taking on that it's not in the old arena of athletic administration. They are now the transportation director. They are now maybe a disciplinarian. They now may be involved in teacher evaluation more so than we were when we first began. When I first began, yes, I evaluated 24 head coaches every year. Well, at the end, it was up to 35. Uh, but not only we did that, but then we got 24 teachers my second year as the division chair. Fortunately, I had an assistant that loved to do teacher evaluation, so he could do that. I didn't have to do it. I just had to sign off on it.
Hmm.
I think that's part of the thing that the new ADs have to come to grips with is that last item in your job responsibility that says other means that you're going to get some other kinds of duties to do beyond what you think are the traditional 120 or so duties and responsibilities of an athletic director. So I think as I kind of counsel the young people, I say, look, understand what you're getting involved in. Make sure that you manage your health and your family and then your job. I said those kind of put those things in the priority so that you can last more than a year or two in this vocation because it's a wonderful vocation. If you love athletics, without a doubt, this is where you belong.
That is some great insight. Let me ask you a little bit more in detail. I know you mentioned Don, one of your mentors, talked about how he pretty much told you you're going to be involved in the Illinois Association and the NIAAA. But so then take a minute and share with our audience, you personally, your road through obviously the Illinois Association, to obviously to where you became the executive director and the NIAAA level.
Yeah, when again, as that my first year when my Marine sir told me, he said, you got to be involved in the IADA. And Tim Fay and myself, who was the athletic director at Morton High School at the time, which was the largest public high school in Illinois, 8,000 students in 3 buildings. You can imagine that, 8,000
Mm.
students in one school. Uh, he and I are sitting together, and Bernie said, "Need some guys to work on Illinois athletic director registration. You guys would be awesome. You both understand computers." And he goes, "I don't understand computers." And Murray says, "No, but Mike does." And so we became the registration chair for like 10 years. But that was a great experience because we got to learn because when they came into the conference, you knew who they were because you had dealt with them in registration. And that was back in the days prior to a lot of the registration being online. You did a lot of paper and pencil back and forth. And uh, so you got to know athletic directors throughout the state. And through our Tim moved lot of registration and became the president of the IAA. And one day, our treasurer was retiring, and I was in charge of registration at the time. And Rich Griffin goes, "You're going to be the next treasurer." I said, "Well, that's fine." And so the board meeting came, and sure enough, I got appointed the treasurer of the Illinois Athletic Directors Association. And we didn't, everything was again paper and pencil. There was not Quicken. There was no one knew what the budget was except the treasurer. It was kind of you sit back today and you go, how do you run an organization that's got, 600 members and you're running a conference that's, got 300, 400 conference attendees and you've got hundreds of thousands of dollars coming in and out and you'd really only have a checkbook. That's all you've got. And so we did have to do a little streamlining there and put in some situations where you had to had to convince the board to let's get us bonded, let's get us, protected, get some liability insurance for our organization, those kinds of things. And at the same time I'm doing that, my boss, Myrnie Lazier, said, you need to get certified. And there was no RAA at the time, so you had to jump in and do your CAA. So you had to, at that time, you had like 2 or 3 years of experience to get your points to fill out the form. So everything that was on that form, he knew was on the form, and he said, "Okay, now you're going to run this IHSA tournament. You're going to run this. You're going to do this. You're going to host these coaches meetings. You're going to do this, this, this." So he was grooming me along the way for my eventuality to fill out the CAA form. And then at the same time, they started the leadership training classes. And I think Doug Smith, who's a former Hall of Fame inductee in Illinois, and I believe also the NIAAA, was one of the first teachers of LTC. And he taught me 501, 502, and 503, he and Tom Gilhouse. And we finished teaching that class. And he says, "Okay, now you're going to help us teach other classes." So I became a teacher in the LTC program. And even so much today, I've really taken on kind of a lead role with the Chicago Public Schools and trying to get all of their high school athletic directors certified as RAAs, taking 501, 502, and 503. Washington Bush, a good friend of mine who had retired from Conant High School, and I have taught 501 and 502 to probably 90 athletic directors in the city of Chicago. And many of them have gone on through the generosity of the NIAAA and the outreach program, have gone on to get their 503 and then get their RAA. And this fall, we had another outreach program from the NIAAA for our middle school and junior high sport liaisons in the city of Chicago. And when we first started, it was kind of humorous because we're talking to the executive director at the city of Chicago, CPS and sports, and said, "How many sports liaisons do you have?" And he said, "Well, we probably have 350 to 400 of them in the middle school, junior highs." I said, I don't think the outreach program is going to cover that many people. He says, "Oh, don't worry about it. Maybe 25 or 30 of them will sign up for it." Well, we had 76 sign up for it and have taken 700, and we'll hopefully have another 76 take 702. So it's a good thing to happen, but it's so important, I believe, for us as people that have been fortunate to be mentored in a real positive way as we came through the system, to give back, to give out and mentor our young ADs. And I can't tell a better way of doing it, using the platform that NIAAA has designed in the LTC classes to give us the substance and the outline to move these young ADs through, those early years where, as we used to say, just don't answer the question because you don't know the answer. Well, now they at least may have the answer to a question when they're asked one, they don't, chop that branch off behind them and down they go. So I think back to those situations where as a young AD, I would ask my mentor, what should I do with this situation? And he'd sit back in his chair, he'd look back in his chair and he goes, what do you think you should do? He's a very rhetorical questioning guy. And I'd answer and he'd go, well, it's not bad, but did you think about this? Did you think about that? And that gave me a greater insight, both as the executive director, which I am the first executive director in Illinois. And that came about because the five-state exchange with Michigan, Indiana, Wisconsin, and Iowa, they all had executive directors, and we did not. And for a long time, our board did not want to have an executive director. And I was either 1 year for retirement or 2 years from retirement. And the president at that time said, we're going to have an executive director, and we think Mike Morris would be a great executive director. And knowing our state the way it was, our entire Illinois Athletic Directors Association board is all volunteer, 100%. No one gets paid for anything. I said, well, I'd be honored and privileged to take on that responsibility, but I am not going to usurp the authority of those people, the president, the treasurer, the secretary, the vendor chair, the professional development. I said, I'm going to work with them to continue to grow our organization, to be the best professional development organization that we can be for our membership. And that's kind of how we have gone about during my career as the executive director.
Well, let me ask you a follow-up, Mike. So I want you to talk for a minute about the NADC, what it's like since you've been involved, and that's obviously part of the NIAAA. So take a few minutes on that end.
Yeah, the National Executive Director Council, which Illinois is a member of I think there's 44, maybe 45 of the states that are represented there, is an organization that for me has been a godsend because the knowledge that each state brings, it may not be exactly the same, but we've all been in the same kind of position. I don't care whether it's how to increase membership, how to deal with limited budget, how to deal with the outcome of the pandemic, how to deal with increasing inflationary costs of running conferences, dealing with transgender situation, dealing with the mental health issues that are out there. One of us has been involved more closely maybe in their state than others. Just the other day, I reached out to Dave Ticker in Washington because I remember him mentioning one time about a mentoring program that he had for his junior high and middle school athletic directors. Well, there's the vast knowledge sitting there, and I just tapped into it, and bingo, all of a sudden I've got an outline and a syllabus that I can now put to and give to my junior high liaison in our state and say, here's a footprint. Here's what we need to be doing. And when we go into the city of Chicago, I've got a footprint to deal with these middle school and junior high liaisons. So it's a wealth of knowledge that everybody shares everything. It's just ask the question and you'll get the answer. Sometimes it's kind of interesting when you're in our council meetings at the executive board to have 44 type A personalities all sitting in the same room at the same time discussing a topic because there are some of us who will sit back and listen, and there are others who want to take charge. And I'm very appreciative of both stances on both sides of the aisle. Sometimes when we come into discussionary points, some of the best solutions come in the social atmosphere as opposed to a formalized meeting. So I
Absolutely.
really do appreciate everything I've learned from them. And in terms of the NIAAA, the National Athletic Directors Conference that we have yearly is a remarkable venue to go to. We encourage scholarship members from our state to go to the national conference. Last year was in Austin. It was a tremendous experience. The two ADs that we scholarship, one was from the city of Chicago, one was from rural Illinois. they couldn't say enough about what they learned in 3 days. From the mini sessions, general speakers to the vendor show, they were just like, oh my God, I can't believe I've never been to this before. So in your state, or if you're an athletic director listening to this podcast, I can't suggest highly enough to save your pennies and get to the national conference. Or if not, at least go into the resource center and get onto the videos that are made available to us as members of the NIAAA to see what's being done at the national conference.
Great advice. Thanks so much for sharing, and thanks for all your insight over the course of this interview. Let's finish up with a couple of items. The first being this: I need Mike's two suggestions for a brand new AD in order for them to become a success. What would your two suggestions be?
Don't be afraid to ask questions. Uh, pick someone in your conference that you can relate to, that maybe you've coached against, you've coached with, and you've developed a collegiate relationship, a personal relationship, because on a daily basis, as I mentioned, Tim Fay, Ken Schreiner was the next school district next to mine at Hinsdale Central. It was amazing. You know, it would never be a day that we probably wouldn't have a phone call back and forth. Just a collegial phone call that you may had a question, maybe it was something that happened at a contest, and how did you handle this? How would you handle that? Rather than being that person that's on the edge of the branch, as I mentioned before, uh, get a little closer to the trunk of the tree. And that trunk of the tree is those people that have been through those life experiences, and they have a wealth of knowledge. But that wealth of knowledge is not going to come overtly because they're not those type of people. They don't tend to offer that kind of information unless asked. Once they're asked, they will wholeheartedly give you everything they've got. And again, saying to those new ADs, please ask the question. Get involved. The second thing is get involved. Get involved with your state organization, get involved with your state athletic association, and get involved in NIAAA. You're going to gain more insight and more wisdom from those three areas than you could from any book ever written by anyone. Not to say you shouldn't be an avid reader, but I honestly believe those personal contacts you develop at the state association level, at the athletic directors association level, and at the national association, much like Mark, I have a relationship that goes back 10, 12 years. I can pick up the phone and call him about a question. How would you do this in your state? And I'm sure he would say the same coming back to me.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely. That is some great insight. Thanks for sharing. Let's finish with this question. Mike, what question should I have asked you that I failed to ask you?
I saw that. I saw it in your notes, and I was kind of laughing. Uh, the one question I always ask people, they ask me, why did you leave? Why did you retire? I retired
Well,
because I felt at the time that it was time for a younger person to take over, not because I didn't love the job. And when the financial planners came to talk to the 24 people in our district who were retiring because of our age, and they showed us our options, it became quite evident that I probably was going to be working for about $1,000 a year difference between what I
yes.
was going to pay in retirement and what I could do. And at that time, I knew that I was going to go back and work for Athletics 2008 to 18 and be the kind of the business manager of our organization and try to expand from, I think we had like 17 schools. We wanted to spread it out throughout the state. And I was going to be involved in not only soliciting, but also teaching and training secretaries and athletic administrators on how to use the management software that we had developed. So I had a secondary job already kind of planned. I didn't realize that I was going to be a head boys golf coach a year later for a private school in our community, but I did that because I got a call from a real close friend, and he said, my coach has got colon cancer and I need a coach tomorrow. Can you do it? I said, yeah, I'll do it for a year. Well, 13 years later, I retired from coaching. So I've been coaching forever and ever. I'm fortunate to be involved in the Illinois Athletic Directors Association. Get to mentor all kinds of young people, uh, and some are older young people because they're starting late in their career as an athletic administrator. But what a wonderful vocation. And I wholeheartedly suggest anybody who loves athletics, loves to be involved, providing the best education-based athletic opportunity for kids to become an athletic director.
On
Thanks,
that
Mark.
note, yeah, thank you. On that note, that wraps up this edition of the UIAAA Connection. Again, our special guest today has been Mike Morris, Certified Master Athletic Administrator, the Executive Director of the Illinois Athletic Directors Association. Mike, can't thank you enough for being on today.
You're welcome, sir.
For our
Head out to
listeners,
the clubhouse.
yeah, for our listeners, we hope you tune in again next week for another edition of the UIAAA Connection.